All right. It is Memorial Day today. I had a great Memorial Day with Nathan and his family down in Stuart, Florida. It was very fun, very much needed, great fellowship, a really good time. You know, I really needed that. I really did. So I'm thankful. Shout out Nathan. Thank you so much. It was a blast. And the other people that I met today too, the other families. So it was really good. I tried doing a short, but I couldn't get the music to do the full minute length. It cut out after 15 seconds. Yeah, that bothers me. Because it's like I'm doing a minute short on YouTube, and it only gives me a 15-second music clip just for that, not the whole length. Like, what is up with you, YouTube? Come on. What is up with me? Maybe not finding it. I tried. I was clicking, trying to adjust the sound to get the whole 60 seconds, and it would not get it. It's super frustrating, but I guess because I want to do my talk about my 30-minute teaching that I listened to today, just now, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do it in a minute short on YouTube, and I want to make it good with music, and it cuts out after 15 seconds. It's like, what is that? Like, what is that? Come on, that's annoying. That's super annoying, YouTube. But I'll do it on here. All right, maybe I'll fix it later, find out something later. But so my video that I watched today was the meaning of holiness, and by R.C. Sproul. It was about a half hour long. At the end of this video, I'll do my best to find the link and put it at the end. And by the way, I'm going to go through 2 hours straight because I got to do my 2 hours today. So this video I will do 2 hours straight of Bible reading. So, holy. What is holy? The definition of holy is dedicated or consecrated to God or a religious purpose. Sacred. Holy, separate. Other, that which is different from something else. That which is holy is different. R.C. Sproul said holy is used as an adjective in the Bible, like a holiday or holy day. Today is Memorial Day. It's a day that is set apart for a part of remembrance. He gave a phobia called xenophobia, which means scared of foreigners, and how we have that towards God. We fear God because He is different from us. People were drawn to Jesus and terrified of Him too. When Jesus was talking to His disciples and He gave them the Lord's Prayer, He said, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." And that is why I'm talking so calm and slow, I guess, throughout this video now, because like it hit me. It hit me at the end of the video when he said that. I was like, that was like the first thing he said, that Jesus said. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. And that just, whew. it just took over me. I couldn't even speak. I don't know. It's still, I'm having trouble speaking. I'm just like, next time I speak about the holy God, I better be giving him respect and not using his name in vain, which is a commandment, right? Be different from the normal standards of this world. Being a Christian, right? Mirror and reflect the character of God to a dying world, right? Hallowed be your name. Different, special, exalted, extraordinary. It makes me think about people who do use God's name in vain. And it's like, okay. Have you ever wondered why that's a commandment? I have. It's because it's not just something you just use and say and that's it. No. There's so much more. It's powerful. It's holy. And I'm still in awe. I'm still in awe. You know, I can't even explain it. It's really hitting me. It's my brain is computing it, and it's impacting all my cells in my body, and it's still computing it. And that is my notes for my 30-minute video of a teacher, which I like a lot, is R.C. Sproul, and that was his video. So it's Monday, it's Memorial Day. Had a great day today, and we're going to start with the word. Alright, we left off finishing chapter 8 of 2 Chronicles. So now we're going to start in chapter 29 of 2 Chronicles, reading out of the NIV translation. Okay? Hezekiah purifies the temple, verse 1. Hezekiah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. In the first month of the first year of his reign, he opened the doors of the temple of the Lord and repaired them. He brought them in the square on the east side and said, "Listen to me, Levites. Consecrate yourselves now and consecrate the temple of the Lord, the God of your ancestors. Remove all defilement from the sanctuary." Verse 6. Our parents were unfaithful. They did evil in the eyes of the Lord our God and forsook him. They turned their faces away from the Lord's dwelling place and turned their backs on him. They also shut the doors of the portico and put out the lamps. They did not burn incense or present any burnt offerings at the sanctuary to the God of Israel. Therefore, the anger of the Lord has fallen on Judah and Jerusalem. He has made them an object of dread and horror and scorn, as you can see with your own eyes. This is what our fathers have fallen by the sword, and why our sons and daughters and our wives are in captivity. Verse 10. Now I intend to make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, so that his fierce anger will turn away from us. My sons, do not be negligent now, for the Lord has chosen you to stand before him and serve him, to minister before him and to burn incense. Then these Levites set to work. From the Kohathites, Mohath son of Amasai, and Joel son of Azariah. From the Merarites, Kish son of Abdi, and Azariah son of Jehalelel. From the Gershonites, Joah son of Zimmah, and Eden son of Joah. From the descendants of Eli, Zaphan, Shimri, and Jael. From the descendants of Asaph, Zechariah, and Mattaniah. From the descendants of Heman, Jehiel, and Shimei. From the descendants of Jeduthun, Shemaiah, Uzziel. Verse 15. When they had assembled their fellow Levites and consecrated themselves, they went in to purify the temple of the Lord as the king had ordered, following the word of the Lord. The priests went into the sanctuary of the Lord to purify it. They brought out to the courtyard of the Lord's temple everything unclean that they found in the temple of the Lord. The Levites took it and carried it out to the Kidron Valley. I'm telling you, man, that last part of that video just hit me. It sent vibrations through my body. Verse 17. They began the consecration of the first day of the first month, and by the 8th day of the month they reached the portico of the Lord. For 8 more days they consecrated the temple of the Lord itself, finishing on the 16th day of the first month. Then they went in to King Hezekiah and reported, "We have purified the entire temple of the Lord, the altar of burnt offering with all its utensils, and the table for setting out the consecrated bread with all its articles. We have prepared and consecrated all the articles that King Ahaz removed in his unfaithfulness while he was king. They are now in front of the Lord's altar." Verse 20. Early the next morning, King Hezekiah gathered the city officials together and went up to the temple of the Lord. They brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 male lambs, and 7 male goats as a sin offering for the kingdom, for the sanctuary, and for Judah. The king commanded the priests, the descendants of Aaron, to offer these on the altar of the Lord. So they slaughtered the bulls, and the priests took the blood and splashed it against the altar. Next they slaughtered the rams and splashed their blood against the altar. Then they slaughtered the lambs and splashed their blood against the altar. The goats for the sin offering were brought before the king and the assembly, and they laid their hands on them. The priests then slaughtered the goats and presented their blood on the altar for a sin offering to atone for all Israel, because the king had ordered the burnt offering and the sin offering for all Israel. Verse 25. He stationed the Levites in the temple of the Lord with cymbals, harps, and lyres, in the way prescribed by David and Gad, the king's seer, and Nathan the prophet. This was commanded by the Lord through his prophets. So the Levites stood ready with David's instruments, and the priests with their trumpets. Hezekiah gave the order to sacrifice the burnt offering on the altar. As the offering began, singing to the Lord began also, accompanied by trumpets and the instruments of David, king of Israel. The whole assembly bowed in worship, while the musicians played and the trumpets sounded. All this continued until the sacrifice of the burnt offering was completed. When the offerings were finished, the king and everyone present with him knelt down and worshipped. Verse 30. King Hezekiah and his officials ordered the Levites to praise the Lord with the words of David and of Asaph the seer. So they sang praises with gladness and bowed down and worshipped. Then Hezekiah said, "You have now dedicated yourselves to the Lord. Come and bring sacrifices and thank offerings to the temple of the Lord." So the assembly brought sacrifices and thank offerings, and all whose hearts were willing brought burnt offerings. The number of burnt offerings the assembly brought was 70 bulls 100 rams and 200 male lambs, all of them for burnt offerings to the Lord. The animals consecrated as sacrifices amounted to 600 bulls and 3,000 sheep and goats. The priests, however, were too few to skin all the burnt offerings, so their relatives, the Levites, helped them until the task was finished, and until other priests had been consecrated, for the Levites had been more conscientious in consecrating themselves than the priests had been. Verse 35. There were burnt offerings in abundance, together with the fat of the fellowship offerings and the drink offerings that accompanied the burnt offerings. So the service of the temple of the Lord was re-established. Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced at what God had brought about for his people, because it was done so quickly. And that completes chapter 9. I'm going to underline verse 36 because I used to think me being fast was a bad thing, but it's not. It's a gift. God can move quickly, right? Chapter 30. Hezekiah celebrates the Passover. Verse 1. Hezekiah sent word to all Israel and Judah, and also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh, inviting them to come to the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. The king and his officials and the whole assembly in Jerusalem decided to celebrate the Passover in the second month. They had not been able to celebrate it at the regular time because not enough priests had consecrated themselves and the people had not assembled in Jerusalem. The plan seemed right both to the king and to the whole assembly. Verse 5. They decided to send a proclamation throughout Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, calling the people to come to Jerusalem and celebrate the Passover to the Lord, the God of Israel. It had not been celebrated in large numbers according to what was written. At the king's command, couriers went throughout Israel and Judah with letters from the king and from his officials, which read, People of Israel, return to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, that he may return to you who are left, who have escaped from the hand of the kings of Assyria. Do not be like your parents and your fellow Israelites, who were unfaithful to the Lord, the God of their ancestors, so that he made them an object of horror, as you see. Do not be stiff-necked, as your ancestors were. Submit to the Lord. Come to his sanctuary, which he has consecrated forever. Serve the Lord your God, so that his fierce anger will turn away from you. If you return to the Lord, then your fellow Israelites and your children will be shown compassion by their captors and will return to this land. For the Lord your God is gracious and compassionate. He will not turn his face from you if you return to him. That completes verse 9. Isn't that beautiful? Actually, El Kanun is Hebrew, which means gracious God. I'm just going to underline that because it's right here, you know. The Lord your God is gracious and compassionate. Verse 10. The couriers went from town to town in Ephraim and Manasseh as far as Zebulun, but people scorned and ridiculed them. Nevertheless, some from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and went to Jerusalem. Also in Judah, the hand of God was on the people to give them unity of mind to carry out what the king and his officials had ordered, following the word of the Lord. A very large crowd of people assembled in Jerusalem to celebrate the festival of unleavened bread in the second month. They removed the altars in Jerusalem and cleared away the incense altars and threw them into the Kidron Valley. Verse 15. They slaughtered the Passover lamb on the 14th day of the 2nd month. The priests and the Levites were ashamed and consecrated themselves and brought burnt offerings to the temple of the Lord. Then they took up their regular positions and prescribed in the law of Moses, the man of God. The priest splashed against the altar, the blood handed to them by the Levites. Since many in the crowd had not consecrated themselves, the Levites had to kill the Passover lambs for all those who were not ceremonially clean and could not consecrate their lambs to the Lord. Although most of the many people who came from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun had not purified themselves, yet they ate the Passover, contrary to what was written. But Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, May the Lord, who is good, pardon everyone who sets their heart on seeking God, the Lord, the God of their ancestors, even if they are not clean according to the rules of the sanctuary. That completes verse 19. I'm just going to highlight that. You know, I like the name Hezekiah, even to the point where I could name my son that, if God permits me a son. Verse 20. And the Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people. The Israelites who were present in Jerusalem celebrated the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days with great rejoicing, while the Levites and priests praised the Lord every day with resounding instruments dedicated to the Lord. Hezekiah spoke encouragingly to all the Levites, who showed good understanding of the service of the Lord. I'm going to highlight that as well. For the 7 days they ate their assigned portion and offered fellowship offerings and praised the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Verse 23. The whole assembly then agreed to celebrate the festival 7 more days. So for another 7 days they celebrated joyfully. Hezekiah, king of Judah, provided 1,000 bulls and 7,000 sheep and goats for the assembly, and the officials provided them with 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep and goats. A great number of priests consecrated themselves. Verse 25. The entire assembly of Judah rejoiced, along with the priests and Levites and all who had assembled from Israel, including the foreigners who had come from Israel and also those who resided in Judah. What does xenophobia mean? Being afraid of foreigners. There was great joy in Jerusalem, for since the days of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, there had been nothing like this in Jerusalem. The priests and the Levites stood to bless the people, and God heard them, for their prayer reached heaven, his holy dwelling place. And that completes chapter 30. Chapter 31. When all this had ended, verse 1. When all this had ended, the Israelites who were there went out to the towns of Judah, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. They destroyed the high places and the altars throughout Judah and Benjamin and in Ephraim and in Manasseh. After they had destroyed all of them, the Israelites returned to their own towns and to their own property. Contributions for worship. Verse 2. Hezekiah assigned the priests and Levites to divisions, each of them according to their duties as priests or Levites, to offer burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, to minister, to give thanks, and to sing praises at the gates of the Lord's dwelling. The king contributed from his own possessions for the morning and evening burnt offerings and for the burnt offerings on the Sabbaths, at the new moons and at the appointed festivals, as written in the law of the Lord. He ordered the people living in Jerusalem to give the portion due the priests and Levites so they could devote themselves to the law of the Lord. Verse 5. As soon as the order went out, the Israelites generously gave the first fruits of their grain, new wine, olive oil, and honey, and all that the fields produced. They brought a great amount, a tithe of everything. The people of Israel and Judah who lived in the towns of Judah also brought a tithe of their herds and flocks, and a tithe of the holy things dedicated to the Lord their God, and they piled them in heaps. Verse 7. They began doing this in the 3rd month and finished in the 7th month. When Hezekiah and his officials came and saw the heaps, they praised the Lord and blessed his people Israel. Verse 9. Hezekiah asked the priests and Levites about the heaps, and Azariah, the chief priest from the family of Zadok, answered, Since the people began to bring their contributions to the temple of the Lord, we have had enough to eat and plenty to spare, because the Lord has blessed his people, and this great amount is left over. Hezekiah gave orders to prepare storerooms in the temple of the Lord, and this was done. Then they faithfully brought in the contributions, tithes, and dedicated gifts. Coniah, a Levite, was the overseer in charge of these things, and his brother Shimei was next in rank. Jehiel, Azariah, Nahath, Asahel, Jeremoth, Jozabad, Eliel, Esmachiah, Mahath, and Benaniah were assistants of Coniah and Shimei his brother. All these served by appointment of King Hezekiah, and Azariah the official in charge of the temple of God. Verse 14. Kor, son of Imnah, the Levite, keeper of the east gate, was in charge of the freewill offerings given to God, distributing the contributions made to the Lord and also the consecrated gifts. Verse 15. Eden, Miniamin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah assisted him faithfully in the towns of the priests, distributing to their fellow priests according to their divisions, old and young alike. In addition, they distributed to the males 3 years old or more, whose names were in the genealogical records, all who would enter the temple of the Lord to perform the daily duties of their various tasks, according to their responsibilities and their divisions. And they distributed to the priests enrolled by their families in the genealogical records, and likewise to the Levites 20 years old or more, according to their responsibilities and their divisions. Verse 18. They included all the little ones, the wives, and the sons and daughters of the whole community listed in these genealogical records, for they were faithful in consecrating themselves. As for the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who lived on the farmlands around their towns or in any other towns, men were designated by name to distribute portions to every male among them, and to all who were recorded in the genealogies of the Levites. Genealogies. Verse 20. This is what Hezekiah did throughout Judah, doing what was good and right and faithful before the Lord his God. I'm going to highlight that. In everything, verse 21, in everything that he undertook in the service of God's temple and obedience to the law and the commands, he sought his God and worked wholeheartedly, and so he prospered. It's like something in my nose. That completes chapter 31. Chapter 22. Excuse me. Sennacherib threatens Jerusalem. Verse 1. After all that Hezekiah had so faithfully done, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and invaded Judah. He laid siege to the fortified cities, thinking to conquer them for himself. When Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come and that he intended to wage war against Jerusalem, he consulted with his officials and military staff about blocking off the water from the springs outside the city, and they helped him. They gathered a large group of people who blocked all the springs and the stream that flowed through the land. Why should the kings of Assyria come and find plenty of water? They said. Verse 5. Then he worked hard repairing all the broken sections of the wall and building towers on it. He built another wall outside that one and reinforced the terraces of the city of David. He also made large numbers of weapons and shields. He appointed military officers over the people and assembled them before him in the square at the city gate and encouraged them with these words: Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged because of the king of Assyria and the vast army with him. For there is a greater power with us than with him. I'm going to highlight that. Verse 7. You know, I was very blessed today with a book. Actually, Nathan's mother blessed me with. God blessed me with it. It's this book right here. Evidence That Demands a Verdict by Josh McDowell and Sean McDowell, which is his son. This book is a book that I have in Vegas before I came to Florida. And I didn't bring it with me. And I'm very happy that God put it on our heart to give this to me, because I needed this book to teach actually one of my apologetics classes in my videos. If you scroll down and look, I was fortunate to teach 8 high school students at a Calvary Chapel church, because not only God, but Jeff Norris and his wife Julie Norris, and God bless them. I wouldn't have taught the class without them, and they thought I was fit to teach some apologetics to those high schoolers. And when I was writing my notes and everything, I'm like, man, if only I had my book. If only I had my book, so that way I can have access and get more information. But I had to go on his YouTube videos, so I'm thankful. Verse 8. With him is only the arm of flesh, but with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people gained confidence from what Hezekiah the king of Judah said. That completes verse 8. This is the importance of a leader, of a godly leader, such as Hezekiah. I'll read it again. Verse 8. Excuse me. With him is only the arm of flesh. Talking about the Assyria king. But with us is the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. And the people gained confidence. Why? From what Hezekiah the king of Judah said. I'm going to highlight that as well. Later, when Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and all his forces were laying siege to Lachish, he sent his officers to Jerusalem with this message for Hezekiah, king of Judah, and for all the people of Judah who were there. Verse 10. This is what Sennacherib, king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing your confidence that you remain in Jerusalem under siege? When Hezekiah says the Lord our God will save us from the land of the king of Assyria, he is misleading you to let you die of hunger and thirst. Did not Hezekiah himself remove this God's high places and altars, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before one altar and burn sacrifices on it? Verse 13. Do you not know what I and my predecessors have done to all the peoples of the other lands? Were the gods of those nations ever able to deliver their land from my hand? Who of all the gods of these nations that my predecessors destroyed has been able to save his people from me? How then can your God deliver you from my hand? Verse 15. Now do not let Hezekiah deceive you and mislead you like this. Do not believe him, for no God of any nation or kingdom has been able to deliver his people from my hand or the hand of my predecessors. How much less will your God deliver you from my hand? Sennacherib's officers spoke further against the Lord God and against his servant Hezekiah. The king also wrote letters ridiculing the Lord, the God of Israel, and saying this against him. Just as the gods of the peoples of the other lands did not rescue their people from my hand, so the God of Hezekiah would not rescue his people from my hand. Then they called out in Hebrew to the people of Jerusalem who were on the wall, to terrify them and make them afraid in order to capture the city. They spoke about the God of Jerusalem as they did about the gods of the other peoples of the world, the work of human hands. Verse 20. King Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, cried out in prayer to heaven about this. And the Lord sent an angel who annihilated all the fighting men and the commanders and officers in the camp of the Assyrian king. So he withdrew to his own land in disgrace. And when he went into the temple of his God, some of his sons, his own flesh and blood, cut him down with the sword. So the Lord saved Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem from the hand of Sennacherib, king of Assyria, and from the hand of all others. He took care of them on every side. Many brought offerings to Jerusalem for the Lord and valuable gifts for Hezekiah, king of Judah. From then on, he was highly regarded by all the nations. Hezekiah's pride, success, and death. Verse 24. In those days Hezekiah became ill and was at the point of death. He prayed to the Lord, who answered him and gave him a miraculous sign. Verse 25. But Hezekiah's heart was proud, and he did not respond to the kindness shown him. Therefore the Lord's wrath was on him and on Judah and Jerusalem. Then Hezekiah repented of the pride of his heart, as did the people of Jerusalem. Therefore the Lord's wrath did not come on them during the days of Hezekiah. Hezekiah had very great wealth and honor, and he made treasuries for his silver and gold and for his precious stones, spices, shields, and all kinds of valuables. He also made buildings to store the harvest of grain, new wine, and olive oil, and he made stalls for various kinds of cattle and pens for the flocks. He built villages and acquired great numbers of flocks and herds, for God had given him very great riches. Verse 30. It was Hezekiah who blocked the upper outlet of the Gihon spring and channeled the water down to the west side of the city of David. He succeeded in everything he undertook. But when envoys were sent by the rulers of Babylon to ask him about the miraculous sign that had occurred in the land, God left him to test him and to know everything that was in his heart. The other events of Hezekiah's reign and his acts of devotion are written in the visions of the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. Hezekiah rested with his ancestors and was buried on the hill where the tombs of David's descendants are. All Judah and the people of Jerusalem honored him when he died, and Manasseh his son succeeded him as king. That completes chapter 32. I just want to underline, there's these different books that they talk about. I circled it. Julian's home. Alright, chapter 33. Manasseh, king of Judah, verse 1. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had demolished. He also erected altars to the Baals and made Asherah poles. He bowed down to all the starry host and worshipped them. He built altars in the temple of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, "My name will remain in Jerusalem forever." Verse 5. In both courts of the temple of the Lord he built altars to all the starry host. He sacrificed his children in the fire in the valley of Ben Hinnom, practiced divination and witchcraft, saw omens, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. He took the image he had made and put it in God's temple, of which God had said to David and to his son Solomon, "In this temple and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. I will not again make the feet of the Israelites leave the land I assigned to your ancestors, if only they will be careful to do everything I commanded them concerning all the laws, decrees, and regulations given through Moses." But Manasseh led Judah and the people of Jerusalem astray, so that they did more evil than the nations the Lord had destroyed before the Israelites. Then the Lord spoke to Manasseh and his people, but they paid no attention. Verse 11. So the Lord brought against them the army commanders of the king of Assyria, who took Manasseh prisoner, put a hook in his nose, bound him with bronze shackles, and took him to Babylon. In his distress he sought the favor of the Lord his God, and humbled himself greatly before the God of his ancestors. And when he prayed to him, the Lord was moved by his entreaty and listened to his plea. So he brought him back to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord is God. Afterward he rebuilt the outer wall of the city of David, west of the Gihon spring in the valley, as far as the entrance of the fish gate, and encircling the hill of Ophel. He also made it much higher. He stationed military commanders in all the fortified cities in Judah. Verse 15. He got rid of the foreign gods and removed the image from the temple of the Lord, as well as all the altars he had built on the temple hill and in Jerusalem, and he threw them out of the city. Then he restored the altar of the Lord and sacrificed fellowship offerings and thank offerings on it, and told Judah to serve the Lord, the God of Israel. The people, however, continued to sacrifice at the high places, but only to the Lord their God. The other events of Manasseh's reign, including his prayer to his God, and the words the seer spoke to him in the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, and written in the annals of the kings of Israel. His prayer and how God was moved by his entreaty, as well as all his sins and unfaithfulness, and the sites where he built high places and set up Asherah poles and idols before he humbled himself, as these are written in the records of the seers. Verse 20, Manasseh rested with his ancestors and was buried in his palace, and Amon his son succeeded him as king. Amon, king of Judah. Verse 21, Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 2 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done. Amon worshipped and offered sacrifices to all the idols Manasseh had made. But unlike his father Manasseh, he did not humble himself before the Lord. Amon increased his guilt. Amon's officials conspired against him and assassinated him in his palace. Verse 25, Then the people of the land killed all who had plotted against King Amon, and they made Josiah his son king in his place. That completes chapter 33. Chapter 34. Josiah reforms. Verse 1. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and followed the ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of his father David. In his 12th year he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of high places, Asherah poles, and idols. Under his direction the altars of the Baals were torn down. He cut to pieces the incense altars that were above them, and smashed the Asherah poles and the idols. These he broke to pieces and scattered over the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. Verse 5, He burned the bones of the priests on their altars, and so he purged Judah and Jerusalem. In the towns of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali, and in the ruins around them, he tore down the altars and the Asherah poles, and crushed the idols to powder, and cut to pieces all the incense altars throughout Israel. Then he went back to Jerusalem. In the 18th year of Josiah's reign, to purify the land and the temple, he sent Shaphan son of Azaliah and Manasseh, the ruler of the city, with Joah son of Joahaz, the recorder, to repair the temple of the Lord his God. Verse 9. They went to Hilkiah the high priest and gave him the money that had been brought into the temple of God, which the Levites, who were the gatekeepers, had collected from the people of Manasseh, Ephraim, and the entire remnant of Israel, and from all the people of Judah and Benjamin, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Verse 10. Then they entrusted it to the men appointed to supervise the work on the Lord's temple. These men paid the workers who repaired and restored the temple. They also gave money to the carpenters and builders to purchase dressed stone and timber for joists and beams for the buildings that the kings of Judah had allowed to fall into ruin. Verse 12. The workers labored faithfully over them to direct them from Jahath and Obadiah. Levites descended from Merari, and Zechariah and Meshullam descended from Kohath, the Levite Kohath. The Levites, all who were skilled in playing musical instruments, had charge of the laborers and supervised all the workers from job to job. Some of the Levites were secretaries, scribes, and gatekeepers. the book of the law found. Verse 14. When they were bringing out the money that had been taken into the temple of the Lord, Hilkiah the priest found the book of the law of the Lord that had been given through Moses. Verse 15. Hilkiah said to Shaphan the secretary, I have found the book of the law in the temple of the Lord. He gave it to Shaphan. Then Shaphan took the book to the king and reported it to him. Your officials are doing everything that has been committed to them. They have paid out the money that was in the temple of the Lord and have entrusted it to the supervisors and workers. Then Shaphan the secretary informed the king, Hilkiah the priest has given me a book. And Shaphan read from it in the presence of the king. When the king heard the words of the law, he tore his robes. Verse 20. He gave these orders to Hilkiah, Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Abdon, son of Micah, Shaphan the secretary, and Asaiah the king's attendant. Go and inquire of the Lord for me, and for the remnant in Israel and Judah, about what is written in the book that has been found. Great is the Lord's anger that is poured out on us, because those who have gone before us have not kept the word of the Lord. They have not acted in accordance with all that is written in this book. Hilkiah and those the king had sent with him went to speak to the prophet Huldah, who was the wife of Shallum, son of Tokhath, the son of Hashra, keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the new quarter. Verse 23. She said to them, This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Tell the man who sent you to me, this is what the Lord says. I am going to bring disaster on this place and its people. All the curses written in the book that has been read in the presence of the king of Judah. Verse 25. Because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods and aroused my anger by all that their hands have made. My anger will be poured out on this place and will not be quenched. Tell the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of the Lord, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says concerning the words you heard. Because your heart was responsive and you humbled yourself before God when you heard what he spoke against this place and its people, and because you humbled yourself before me and tore your robes and wept in my presence. I have heard you, declares the Lord. Now I will gather you to your ancestors, and you will be buried in peace. Your eyes will not see all the disaster I am going to bring on this place and on those who live here. So they took her answer back to the king. Then the king called together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. Verse 30. He went up to the temple of the Lord with the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests and the Levites, all the people from the least to the greatest. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the temple of the Lord. Verse 31. The king stood by his pillar and renewed the covenant of the presence of the Lord, to follow the Lord and his commands, statutes, and decrees with all his heart and all his soul, and to obey the words of the covenant written in this book. Verse 32. Then he had everyone in Jerusalem and Benjamin pledge themselves to it. The people of Jerusalem did this in accordance with the covenant of God, the God of their ancestors.
All right, let's get
Verse 33. Excuse me. I'm just trying to check. A lot of this just sounds super familiar. I know it's repeating of what is said before, but I just want to be extra sure. Alright. Verse 33. Josiah removed all the detestable idols from all the territory belonging to the Israelites, and he had all who were present in Israel serve the Lord their God. As long as he lived, they did not fail to follow the Lord, the God of their ancestors. I like that. That completes chapter 34. See, again, we see the importance of a leader. As long as he lived. Who? Josiah. They did not fail to follow the Lord, because he was in charge. He was the leader. He was the godly leader. And having that godly leader makes the world of a difference. From suffering to joy. Because I experienced that in the Marine Corps. Makes a big difference who you have in your command. Alright. Chapter 35, Josiah celebrates the Passover. Verse 1, Josiah celebrated the Passover to the Lord in Jerusalem. And the Passover lamb was slaughtered on the 14th day of the first month. He appointed the priests to their duties and encouraged them in the service of the Lord's temple. He said to the Levites, who instructed all Israel and who had been consecrated to the Lord, put the sacred ark in the temple that Solomon son of David king of Israel built. It is not to be carried about on your shoulders. Now serve the Lord your God and his people Israel. Prepare yourselves by families in your divisions, according to the instructions written by David, king of Israel, and by his son Solomon. Verse 5. Stand in the holy place with a group of Levites for each subdivision of the families of your fellow Israelites, the lay people. Slaughter the Passover lambs, consecrate yourselves, and prepare the lambs for your fellow Israelites, doing what the Lord commanded through Moses. Josiah provided for all the lay people who were there a total of 30,000 lambs and goats for the Passover offerings, and also 3,000 cattle, all from the king's own possessions. His officials also contributed voluntarily to the people and the priests and Levites. Hilkiah, Zechariah, and Jehiel, the officials in charge of God's temple, gave the priests 2,600 Passover offerings and 300 cattle. Also Conaniah, along with Shemaiah and Nathaniel, his brothers, and Hashabiah, Jeriel, and Jozabad, the leaders of the Levites, provided 5,000 Passover offerings and 500 head of cattle for the Levites. In verse 10, the service was arranged, and the priests stood in their places with the Levites in their divisions as the king had ordered. The Passover lambs were slaughtered, and the priests splashed against the altar the blood handed to them, while the Levites skinned the animals. They set aside the burnt offerings to give them to the subdivisions of the families of the people to offer to the Lord, as it is written in the book of Moses. They did the same with the cattle. They roasted the Passover animals over the fire as prescribed, and boiled the holy offerings in pots, cauldrons, and pans, and served them quickly to all the people. Verse 14, after this they made preparations for themselves and for the priests, because the priests, the descendants of Aaron, were sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fat portions until nightfall. So the Levites made preparations for themselves and for the Aaronic priest. Verse 15. The musicians, the descendants of Asaph, were in the places prescribed by David, Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun, the king's seer. The gatekeepers at each gate did not need to leave their posts, because their fellow Levites made the preparations for them. So at the time, the entire service of the Lord was carried out for the celebration of the Passover and the offering of burnt offerings on the altar of the Lord, as King Josiah had ordered. Verse 17, the Israelites who were present celebrated the Passover at that time and observed the festival of unleavened bread for 7 days. The Passover had not been observed like this in Israel since the days of the prophet Samuel, and none of the kings of Israel had ever celebrated such a Passover as did Josiah, with the priests, the Levites, and all Judah and Israel who were with them, or who were there with the people of Jerusalem. The Passover was celebrated in the 18th year of Josiah's reign. The death of Josiah. Verse 20. After all this, when Josiah had set the temple in order, Necho, king of Egypt, went up to fight at Carchemish on the Euphrates, and Josiah marched out to meet him in battle. But Necho sent messengers to him, saying, What quarrel is there, king of Judah, between you and me? It is not you I am attacking at this time, but the house with which I am at war. God has told me to hurry, so stop opposing God who is with me, or he will destroy you. Josiah, however, would not turn away from him, but disguised himself to engage him in battle. He would not listen to what Necho had said to God's command, but went to fight him on the plain of Megiddo. Archers shot King Josiah, and he told his officers, Take me away, I am badly wounded. So they took him out of his chariot, put him in his other chariot, and brought him to Jerusalem, where he died. He was buried in the tombs of his ancestors, and all Judah and Jerusalem mourned for him. Verse 25. Jeremiah composed laments for Josiah, and to this day all the male and female singers commemorate Josiah in the laments. These became a tradition in Israel and are written in the laments. Verse 26. The other events of Josiah's reign and his acts of devotion in accordance with what is written in the law of the Lord, all the events from the beginning to end are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And that completes chapter 35. Oh, one more chapter, and we're more than halfway done with the video, with the session. Alright. Chapter 36, verse 1. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, and made him king in Jerusalem in place of his father, Jehoahaz, king of Judah. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. The king of Egypt dethroned him in Jerusalem and imposed on Judah a levy of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. The king of Egypt made Eliakim, a brother of Jehoahaz, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took Eliakim's brother Jehoahaz and carried him off to Egypt. Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Verse 5. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord his God. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, attacked him and bound him with bronze shackles to take him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took the Babylon articles from the temple of the Lord and put them in the temple there. The other events of Jehoiakim's reign, the detestable things he did, and all that was found against him, are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Jehoiachin, his son, succeeded him as king. Jehoiachin, king of Judah. Verse 9. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months and 10 days. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Verse 10. In the spring, King Nebuchadnezzar sent for him and brought him to Babylon, together with articles of value from the temple of the Lord, and he made Jehoiachin's uncle, Zedekiah, king over Judah and Jerusalem. Zedekiah, king of Judah. Verse 11. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord his God, and did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke the word of the Lord. He also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him take an oath in God's name. He became stiff-necked and hardened his heart, and would not turn to the Lord, the God of Israel. Furthermore, all the leaders of the priests and all the people became more and more unfaithful, following all the detestable practices of the nations and defiling the temple of the Lord, which he had consecrated in Jerusalem. The fall of Jerusalem, verse 15. The Lord, the God of their ancestors, sent word to them through his messengers again and again, because he had pity on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked God's messengers, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord was aroused against his people, and there was no remedy. He brought up against them the king of the Babylonians, who killed their young men with the sword in the sanctuary, and did not spare young men or young women, the elderly for the infirm. God gave them all into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. He carried to Babylon all the articles from the temple of God, both large and small, and all the treasures of the Lord's temple, and the treasures of the king and his officials. They set fire to God's temple and broke down the wall of Jerusalem. They burned all the palaces and destroyed everything of value there. Verse 20. He carried into exile to Babylon the remnant who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and his successors until the kingdom of Persia came to power. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rest all the time of its desolation. It rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. Instead, the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. The Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm, and also put it in writing. Verse 23. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah, and of his people among you may go up, and may the Lord their God be with them. And that completes chapter 36. And that completes the second book of Chronicles. And we will be beginning the book of EZRA, which I have never read before. And before I do that, I'll take a quick minute break. Excuse me. My leg fell asleep. Oh, it's tingling. All right. Back at it. Doing good on time. It'll be my first time doing a complete just 2 hours straight, so I guess you could say I broke a record. So yeah, I'm not even sure what Ezra's about. I'm not. Let's see how many chapters there is. 7, 9, 10. 10 chapters. And what's after the book of Ezra? Should I take a peek? Nehemiah. Was not expecting that. I haven't even read that book either, so let's get to it. Excited. Alright. The Book of Ezra. Cyrus helps the exiles to return. Chapter 1, verse 1. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and also to put it in writing. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem in Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may their God be with them. And in any locality where survivors may now be living, the people are to provide them with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with freewill offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. Verse 5. Then the family heads of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and Levites, everyone whose heart God had moved, prepared to go up and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. All their neighbors assisted them with articles of silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with valuable gifts, in addition to all the freewill offerings. Moreover, King Cyrus brought out the articles belonging to the temple of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem, and had placed in the temple of his God. Cyrus, king of Persia, had them brought by Mithridates, the treasurer, who counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. Verse 9. This was the inventory. Gold dishes, 30. Silver dishes, 1,000. Silver pans, 29. Gold bowls, 30. Matching silver bowls, 410. Other articles, 1,000. Verse 11. In all, there were 5,400 articles of gold and of silver. Sheshbazzar brought all these along with the exiles when they came up from Babylon to Jerusalem. And that completes chapter 1 in the book of Ezra. Chapter 2. The list of the exiles who returned. Verse 1. Now these are the people of the province who came up from the captivity of the exiles whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had taken captive to Babylon. They returned to Jerusalem and Judah, each to their own town, in company with Zerubbabel, Joshua, Nehemiah, Sariah, Reliah, Mordecai, Belshan, Mispar, Bigvai, Rehum, and Benai. Close parentheses. Wow, I haven't said a parentheses for a whole hour. I mean, that's pretty cool. The list of the men of the people of Israel. Verse 3. The descendants of Parosh, 2,172. Of Shephatiah, 372. Of Ira, 775. Of Pahath Moab, parentheses, through the line of Jeshua and Joab, 2,812, close parentheses. Of Elam, 1,254. I actually had a guy in my high school, his name was CJ Elam. He was a white guy. Verse 8. Of Zatu, 945. Of Zakai, 760. Of Benai, 642. Of Bebai, 623. Of Asgad, 1,222. Of Adonikam, 666. Of Bijvai, 2,056. Of Adin, 454. Of Ator, parentheses, through Hezekiah, close parentheses, 98. Of Bezai, 323. Of Jorah, 112. of Hashum 223, of Gebar 95. Verse 21. The men of Bethlehem 123, of Netophah 56, of Anathoth 128, of Azamaveth 42, of Kiriath Jearim, Kephahara and Beroth 743, of Ramah and Geba 621, of Michmash 122, of Bethel and Ai 223, of Nebo 52, of Magbish 156. Verse 31. Of the other Elam 1254, of Haram 320, of Lod, Hadid, and Ono 725, of Jericho 345. Verse 35. Of Senah 3630, the priest, the descendants of Jediah, parentheses, through the family of Jeshua, close parentheses. 973. Of Immer 1052, of Pashur 1247, of Haram 1017. Verse 40. The Levites, the descendants of Jeshua and Kadmiel, parentheses, of the line of Hodaviah, close parentheses, 74. The musicians, the descendants of Asaph, 128. The gatekeepers of the temple, the descendants of Shalom, Atur, Talmon, Akub, Hatita, and Shonobai, 139. The temple servants, the descendants of Zehah, Hashupah, Tabaoth, Kiros, Saiah, Padon, Lebanah, Hagabah, Akub, Hagab, Shammai, Hanan, Gidel, Gahar, Reiah, Rezin, Nekoda, here comes the names again, Gazam, Uzzah, Hasea, Besai, verse 50, Asna, Meunim, Nephesum, Bakbuk, Hakupha, Harher, Bazluth, Mehida, Harsha, Barcodes. Alright, I'll stop. Sisera, Tema, Neziah, and Atiphah. Verse 55. The descendants of the servants of Solomon, the descendants of Sotai, Hassophereth, Peruda, Jala, Darkan, Gidil, Shephatahai, Hatail, Pekarath, Hazebaim, and Ami. The temple servants and the descendants of the servants of Solomon, 392. Verse 59. The following came up from the towns of Tel Melah, Tel Harsha, Kerub, Adon, and Immer, but they could not show that their families were descended from Israel. Verse 60. The descendants of Delilah, Tobiah, and Nekoda, 652. And from among the priests, the descendants of Hobiah, Hakos, and Barzillai, parentheses, a man who had married a daughter of Barzillai the Gileadite and was called by that name, close parentheses. Verse 62. These searched for their family records, but they could not find them, and so were excluded from the priesthood as unclean. The governor ordered them not to eat any of the most sacred food until there was a priest ministering with the Urim and Thummim. Verse 64. The whole company numbered 42,360, besides their 7,337 male and female slaves, and they also had 200 male and female singers. They had 736 horses, 245 mules, 435 camels, and 6,720 donkeys. Verse 68. When they arrived at the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, some of the heads of the families gave freewill offerings toward the rebuilding of the house of God on its site. According to their ability, they gave to the treasury for this work 61,000 derricks of gold. Letter A, what is that? That is about 1,100 pounds. 5,000 minas, B, letter B, that is about 3 tons, of silver, and 100 priestly garments. Verse 70. The priests, the Levites, the musicians, the gatekeepers, and the temple servants settled in their own towns, along with some of the other people, and the rest of the Israelites settled in their towns. And that completes chapter 2. Chapter 3, verse 1. When the 7th month came, and the Israelites had settled in their towns, the people assembled together as one in Jerusalem. Then Joshua son of Jozadak and his fellow priest, and Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel and his associates began to build the altar of the God of Israel to sacrifice burnt offerings on it, in accordance with what is written in the law of Moses, the man of God. Despite their fear of the peoples around them, they built the altar on its foundation and sacrificed burnt offerings on it to the Lord, both the morning and evening sacrifices. Verse 4. Then, in accordance with what is written, they celebrated the festival of tabernacles with the required number of burnt offerings prescribed for each day. After that, they presented the regular burnt offerings, the new moon sacrifices, and the sacrifices for all the appointed sacred festivals of the Lord, as well as those brought as freewill offerings to the Lord. On the first day of the 7th month they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, though the foundation of the Lord's temple had not yet been laid. Rebuilding the temple, verse 7. Then they gave money to the masons and carpenters, and gave food and drink and olive oil to the people of Sidon and Tyre, so that they would bring cedar logs by sea from Lebanon to Joppa, as authorized by Cyrus king of Persia. In the 2nd month of the 2nd year after their arrival at the house of God in Jerusalem, Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel, Joshua son of Jozadak, and the rest of the people, (the priests and the Levites and all who had returned from their captivity to Jerusalem), began the work. They appointed Levites 20 years old and older to supervise the building of the house of the Lord. Joshua and his sons and brothers, and Kadmiel and his sons, descendants of Hodaviah, and the sons of Henadad and their sons and brothers, all Levites, joined together in supervising those working on the house of God. Verse 10. When the builders laid the foundation of the temple of the Lord, the priests in their vestments and with trumpets, and the Levites, the sons of Asaph, with cymbals took their places to praise the Lord, and prescribed by David king of Israel. With praise and thanksgiving they sang to the Lord. He is good. His love toward Israel endures forever. Highlight that. And all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord, because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had been the former temple were wept aloud when they saw the foundation of the temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy. No one can distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sound of weeping, because the people made so much noise, and the sound was heard far away. And that completes chapter 3. I'm so sorry about my nose, man. It's like there's something in there. It's just like my hair's moving around. Alright. Chapter 4 of Opposition to the Rebuilding, verse 1. When the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the exiles were building a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel, they came to Zerubbabel and to the heads of the families and said, "Let us help you build, because like you we seek your God and have been sacrificing to him since the time of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here. But Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the rest of the heads of the families of Israel answered, "You have no part with us in building a temple to our God. We alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, commanded us." Then the peoples around them set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. Verse 5, they bribed officials to work against them and frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, king of Persia, and down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. I see some interesting names here with some interesting pronunciations. Later opposition under Xerxes and Artaxerxes. At the beginning of the reign of Xerxes, they lodged an accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. Verse 7, and in the days of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Bishlam, Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of his associates wrote a letter to Artaxerxes. The letter was written in Aramaic script and in Aramaic language. Okay, let's look. Letter D and E. Or written in Aramaic and translated. The text of 4:8-6:18 is Aramaic. Verse 8. Rehum, the commanding officer, and Shimshai, the secretary, wrote a letter against Jerusalem to Artaxerxes, the king, as follows. Rehum, the commanding officer, and Shimshai, the secretary, together with the rest of their associates, the judges, officials, and administrators over the people from Persia, Uruk, and Babylon, the Elamites of Susa, verse 10, and the other people whom the great and honorable Ashurbanipal deported and settled in the city of Samaria and elsewhere in Trans-Euphrates. Parentheses, this is a copy of the letter they sent him, close parentheses, to King Artaxerxes, from your servants in Trans-Euphrates. The king should know that the people who came up to us from you have gone to Jerusalem and are rebuilding that rebellious and wicked city. They are restoring the walls and repairing the foundations. Verse 13. Furthermore, the king should know that if this city is built and its walls are restored, no more taxes, tribute, or duty will be paid, and eventually the royal revenues will suffer. Now, since we are under obligation to the palace, and it is not proper for us to see the king dishonored, we are sending this message to inform the king, so that a search may be made in the archives of your predecessors. In these records you will find that this city is a rebellious city, troublesome to kings and provinces, a place with a long history of sedition. That is why this city was destroyed. We informed the king that if this city is built and its walls are restored, you will be left with nothing in Trans-Euphrates. Verse 17. The king sent this reply. To Rehum, the commanding officer, Shimshai, the secretary, and the rest of their associates living in Samaria and elsewhere in Trans-Euphrates. Greetings. The letter you sent us has been read and translated in my presence. I issued an order and a search was made, and it was found that this city has a long history of revolt against kings and has been a place of rebellion and sedition. Verse 20. Jerusalem has had powerful kings ruling over the whole of Trans-Euphrates, and taxes, tribute, and duty were paid to them. Now issue an order to these men to stop work, so that this city will not be rebuilt until I so order. Be careful not to neglect this matter. Why let this threat grow to the detriment of the royal interest? As soon as the copy of the letter of King Artaxerxes was read to Rehum and Shimshai, the secretary, and their associates, they went immediately to the Jews in Jerusalem and compelled them by force to stop. Thus the work on the house of God in Jerusalem came to a standstill until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. That completes chapter 4. Get a little drink. Wow, Persia. I wonder what Persia was doing. those times. Alright, 3/4 done. My cousin's calling. Let me answer this call. My cousin James. I love this. I love this man. Hey James.
I have a question.
Yes.
I got two great news. You're like be in shock or you're gonna be happy.
Alright, what is it?
My first question is, what's Grandpa's favorite movie? Action movie.
300?
It starts with the letter B.
If it was gonna be 300, I was gonna freak out. It starts with a letter B?
Yeah. And the last word of the N is a T.
I don't know.
Okay. BLACKLIGHT.
Blacklight?
Yup.
What is that?
It's like Grandpa's favorite movie. Like he's seen the first, second, and third, but he didn't see. I guess they made a fourth one, and it's already out on DVD.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he likes that movie.
Nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and thank you for serving our country.
Oh, thank you, James. Appreciate that. It's very nice of you.
And oh, so I was at work. So I started at. Ivan told me to get up early, so I started at 8. He said. So I went to work. I was talking to my friend. His name's Anthony. So we were talking about the game. Some people were, some people wasn't. Your cousin got a secret admirer.
Yeah, you like someone?
Yeah, but
Nice.
not at work. I'm talking about outside work.
Oh, okay. Nice. Sounds like you're excited. It's always exciting, right, when you have a secret admirer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't find out. Like I knew who the person is. Like she's like this person is friends with my friends. Like my friend Alondra, my friend Stephanie, and I'm trying to think like she's in college. She's in college with my friends, and I'm trying to think. I don't know. I should ask her, but we tried, but we're still taking it slow with the friend zone still. So she just texted me when I got out of work. She saw my face. She knows what I look like.
Okay. She knows what you look like. I mean, that's good, actually. That's a good step.
And she texted too. She said when I was getting ice cream with my mom. So she said to me, "So you see me, like she saw here. I saw her wearing green and blue, like blue shorts." I said, "You know what? This is the girl. Hold on here. This is the girl like we've been talking. She was wearing glasses, but she looks like smart with glasses on."
Nice.
Yeah. I'll say she's probably like Ashley's height.
So she's kind of short.
Yeah.
Hey.
I'll say Ashley. Yeah, probably Ashley or Alexis' height.
Okay. Alexis is a little taller.
Yeah.
Just so you know, I am recording right now, and our whole conversation has been recorded on my video. I have.
Apologize.
It's okay. I answered the call because I wanted to answer it. I got 26 minutes left.
Okay. So me and her been talking. We're still friends still. We're still in the friend zone. So she's right now. She told me she was busy with her family.
And you don't care that this is being recorded, right?
No, I don't care.
I know you don't. I just had to ask.
Just put it between me and you. Like, don't post it.
Oh, I am gonna post this.
Oh, dang it.
Here, we can talk more after.
I'll probably be in bed. I'll be in bed like at 11.
I know I'm gonna be done right before 11.
But it's 10:26 over here.
Yeah, I'm gonna be done in like 25 minutes.
So that'll be like 10:40 or
No, like 11:50, 11:55. Just call me right before it turns 11 o'clock your time.
so I'll call you like at 10:40 then.
No, no, no. Call me at 10:59.
10:59. Oh, damn. I'll probably be asleep by then. I'll
Oh.
try.
Alright, just
Okay.
try. I gotta finish this.
Alright.
Alright?
Alright. Okay. Actually, so you can erase the whole thing, and then hey, I'll just tell you that after it.
What do you mean you erased the whole thing?
Like my conversation, I was telling you.
Like from where? My mind?
No, like the video, like just erase it and read.
I can't.
Dang it!
You know what, James? Honestly, I don't think anyone is. I don't get that many views anyway.
And then.
Yeah, I think you're fine. Yeah, honestly, you'll be alright.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm sorry. It's cut into my video, and I gotta return to this because I'm reading the word of God. All right.
Yeah, but yeah, so I'm taking it slow. Then meantime, I don't know. But we met in person. Like I still want to take it slow.
It's still recording, James.
What is wrong with me?
No, you're good. You're fine. You're just excited, man. I can tell you're very excited. That's good. You wanted to tell me. That's great. I would love to talk to you more about it after I'm done. When I'm done with this video.
Okay.
Is that fine?
Yeah. I'll try.
Just try to stay up a little longer than usual. Like 5 minutes, and then you could talk to me about it. All right?
Okay. How about call me at 10:50 on my time.
I'll try. Okay.
Alright.
All right. Talk to you later.
Alright,
bye. Bye. All right. Excuse me. Sorry. It's my great cousin James. Calls me every day. So let's get back. Yeah. All right. Chapter 5. Tattenai's letter to Darius. Verse 1. Now Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the prophet, a descendant of Iddo, prophesied to the Jews in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, who was over them. Then Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel and Joshua son of Josedek set to work to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. At that time, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai and their associates went to them and asked, "Who authorized you to rebuild this temple and to finish it?" They also asked, "What are the names of those who are constructing this building?" Verse 5. But the eye of their God was watching over the elders of the Jews, and they were not stopped until a report could go to Darius and his written reply be received. This is a copy of the letter that Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Bozenai and their associates, the officials of Trans-Euphrates, sent to King Darius. Verse 7. The report they sent him read as follows: To King Darius, cordial greetings. The king should know that we went to the district of Judah, to the temple of the great God. The people are building it with large stones and placing the timbers in the walls, and the work is being carried on with diligence and is making rapid progress under their direction. We questioned the elders and asked them, "Who authorized you to rebuild this temple and to finish it?" Verse 10. We also asked them in their names so that we could write down the names of their leaders for your information. This is the answer they gave us. We are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and we are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, and one that a great king of Israel built and finished, because our ancestors angered the God of heaven, and he gave them into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean king of Babylon, who destroyed the temple and deported the people to Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to rebuild his house of God. He even removed from the temple of Babylon the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to the temple of Babylon. The king Cyrus gave them to a man named Sheshbazzar, whom he had appointed governor. Verse 15, and he told him, take these articles and go and deposit them in the temple in Jerusalem, and rebuild the house of God on its site. So this Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundations of the house of God in Jerusalem. From that day to the present it has been under construction, but it has not finished. Now, verse 17, now if it pleases the king, let a search be made in the royal archives of Babylon to see if King Cyrus did in fact issue a decree to rebuild this house of God in Jerusalem. Then let the king send us his decision in this matter. That completes chapter 5. Chapter 6. The decree of Darius. Verse 1. King Darius then issued an order, and they searched in the archives stored in the treasury at Babylon. A scroll was found in the citadel of Ecbatana in the province of Media, and this was written on it, Memorandum. In the first year of King Cyrus, the king issued a decree concerning the temple of God in Jerusalem. Let the temple be rebuilt as a place to present sacrifices, and let its foundations be laid. It is to be 60 cubits high and 60 cubits wide, with 3 courses of large stones and 1 of timbers. The costs are to be paid by the royal treasury. Verse 5. Also the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple in Jerusalem and brought to Babylon, are to be returned to their places in the temple of Jerusalem. They are to be deposited in the house of God. Now then, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Boznia, and you other officials of that province, stay away from there. Do not interfere with the work of this temple of God. Let the governor of the Jews and the Jewish elders rebuild the house of God on its site. Verse 8. Moreover, I hereby decree what you are to do for these elders of the Jews in the construction of this house of God. Their expenses are to be fully paid out of the royal treasury from the revenues of Trans-Euphrates, so that the work will not stop. Whatever is needed, young bulls, rams, male lambs, for burnt offerings to the God of heaven, and wheat, salt, wine, and olive oil, as requested by the priest in Jerusalem, must be given them daily without fail. Verse 10. So that they may offer sacrifices pleasing to the God of heaven, and pray for the well-being of the king and his sons. Furthermore, I decree that if anyone defies this edict, a beam is to be pulled from their house, and they are to be impaled on it. And for this crime their house is to be made a pile of rubble. May God, who has caused his name to dwell there, overthrow any king or people who lifts a hand to change his decree, or to destroy this temple in Jerusalem. I, Darius, have decreed it. Let it be carried out with diligence. Completion and dedication of the temple. Verse 13. Then, because of the decree King Darius had sent, Tattenai, governor of Trans-Euphrates, and Shethar-Boznia, and their associates carried it out with diligence. So the elders of the Jews continued to build and prosper under the preaching of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah, a descendant of Iddo. They finished building the temple according to the command of the God of Israel and the decrees of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. Verse 15. The temple was completed on the 3rd day of the month Adar, in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. Then the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles celebrated the dedication of the house of God with joy. For the dedication of this house of God they offered 100 bulls, 200 rams, 400 male lambs, and, as a sin offering for all Israel, 12 male goats, one for each of the tribes of Israel. And they installed the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their groups for the service of God at Jerusalem, according to what is written in the book of Moses. The Passover, verse 19. On the 14th day of the first month, the exiles celebrated the Passover. Verse 20. The priests and Levites had purified themselves and were all ceremonially clean. The Levites slaughtered the Passover lamb for all the exiles, for their relatives, the priests, and for themselves. So the Israelites who had returned from the exile ate it, together with all who had separated themselves from the unclean practices of their Gentile neighbors in order to seek the Lord, the God of Israel. For 7 days they celebrated with joy a festival of unleavened bread, because the Lord had filled them with joy by changing the attitude of the king of Assyria, so that he assisted them in the work on the house of God, the God of Israel. And that completes chapter 6. Chapter 7. Ezra comes to Jerusalem. Verse 1. After these things, during the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia, Ezra, son of Seraiah, the son of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah, the son of Shallum, the son of Zadok, the son of Ahitub, the son of Amariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Meraioth, the son of Zechariah, the son of Uzi, the son of Buki. Verse 5. The son of Abishua, the son of Phinehas, the son of Elasar, the son of Aaron the chief priest. This Ezra came up from Babylon. He was a teacher, well versed in the law of Moses. See, I'm thinking Ezra is a woman's name, and it's not. He was a teacher well versed in the law of Moses, which the Lord, the God of Israel, had given. The king had granted him everything he asked, for the hand of the Lord his God was on him. Some of the Israelites, including priests, Levites, musicians, gatekeepers, and temple servants, also came up to Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. Verse 8. Ezra arrived in Jerusalem in the 5th month of the 7th year of the king. He had begun his journey from Babylon on the 5th day of the 1st month, and he arrived in Jerusalem on the 1st day of the 5th month, for the gracious hand of his God was on him. Verse 10. For Ezra had devoted himself to the study and observance of the law of the Lord, and to teaching its decrees and laws in Israel. King Artaxerxes' letter to Israel, verse 11. This is a copy of the letter King Artaxerxes had given to Ezra the priest, a teacher of the law, a man learned in matters concerning the commands and decrees of the Lord for Israel. Artaxerxes, king of kings, to Ezra the priest, teacher of the law of the God of heaven, greetings. Now I decree that any of the Israelites in my kingdom, including priests and Levites, who volunteer to go to Jerusalem with you may go. You are sent by the king and his 7 advisers to inquire about Judah and Jerusalem with regard to the law of your God, which is in your hand. Verse 15. Moreover, you are to take with you the silver and gold that the king and his advisers have freely given to the king of Israel, whose dwelling is in Jerusalem, together with all the silver and gold you may obtain from the province of Babylon, as well as the free will offerings of the people and priests for the temple of their God in Jerusalem. With this money be sure to buy bulls, rams, and male lambs, together with their grain offerings and drink offerings, and sacrifice them on the altar of the temple of your God in Jerusalem. You and your fellow Israelites may then do whatever seems best with the best of the silver and gold in accordance with the will of your God. Verse 19. Deliver to the God of Jerusalem all the articles entrusted to you for worship in the temple of your God, and anything else needed for the temple of your God that you are responsible to supply you may provide from the royal treasury. Now I, King Artaxerxes, decree that all the treasurers of Trans-Euphrates are to provide with diligence whatever Ezra the priest, the teacher of the law of the God of heaven, may ask of you. Verse 22. Up to 100 talents of silver, 100 cores of wheat, 100 baths of wine, 100 baths of olive oil, and salt without limit. Whatever the God of heaven has prescribed, let it be done with diligence for the temple of the God of heaven. Why should his wrath fall on the realm of the king and on his sons? You are also to know that you have no authority to impose taxes, tribute, or duty on any of the priests, Levites, musicians, gatekeepers, temple servants, or other workers at this house of God. Verse 25. And you, Ezra, in accordance with the wisdom of your God, which you possess, appoint magistrates and judges to administer justice to all the people of Trans-Euphrates, all who know the laws of your God, and you are to teach any who do not know them. Whoever does not obey the law of your God and the law of the king must surely be punished by death, banishment, confiscation of property, or imprisonment. Praise be to the Lord, the God of our ancestors, who has put it into the king's heart to bring honor to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem in this way, and who has extended his good favor to me before the king and his advisers and all the king's powerful officials, because the hand of the Lord my God was on me. I took courage and gathered leaders from Israel to go up with me. And that completes chapter 7. Chapter 8. List of the family heads returning with Ezra. Verse 1. These are the family heads and those registered with them who came up with me from Babylon during the reign of King Artaxerxes. Of the descendants of Phinehas, Gershom. Of the descendants of Ithamar, Daniel. Of the descendants of David, Hattush. Of the descendants of Shechaniah. Of the descendants of Perush, Zechariah, and with him were registered 150 men. Of the descendants of Pahath, Moab, Elihoani, son of Zeriah, and with him 200 men. Verse 5. Of the descendants of Zatu, Shechaniah, son of Jahaziel, and with him 300 men. Of the descendants of Adin, Ebed, son of Jonathan, and with him 50 men. Of the descendants of Elam, Jeshiah, son of Athaliah, and with him 70 men. Of the descendants of Shephatiah, Zebadiah, son of Michael, and with him 80 men. Of the descendants of Joab, Obadiah, son of Jehiel, and with him 218 men. Verse 10. Of the descendants of Bani, Shelomith, son of Josephiah, and with him 160 men. Of the descendants of Bebai, Zechariah, son of Bebai, and with him 28 men. Of the descendants of Azgad, Johanan, son of Hakatan, and with him 110 men. Of the descendants of Adonikim, the last ones whose names were Eliaphat, Jehu, and Shemaiah, and with them 60 men. Of the descendants of Bigvai, Uthai, and Zakur, and with them 70 men. They returned to Jerusalem. Verse 15. I assembled them at the canal that flows toward Ahava, and we camped there 3 days. When I checked among the people and the priests, I found no Levites there. So I summoned Eliezer, Ariel, Shemaiah, Elnathan, Jerub, Elnathan, that's 2 Elnathans, Nathan, Zechariah, and Meshullam, who were leaders, and Jerub and Elnathan, who were men of learning, and I ordered them to go to Iddo, the leader of Casaphiah. I told them what to say to Iddo and his fellow Levites, the temple servants in Casaphiah, so that they might bring attendance to us for the house of our God, because the gracious hand of our God was on us. They brought us Sherebiah, a capable man from the descendants of Mali, son of Levi, the son of Israel, and Sherebiah's sons and brothers. Verse 18. In all, and Hashabiah, together with Jesaiah, from the descendants of Merari, and his brothers and nephews, 20 in all. Verse 20. They also brought 220 of the temple servants, a body that David and the officials had established to assist the Levites. All were registered by name. There, by the Ahava canal, I proclaimed a fast, so that we might humble ourselves before our God, and ask him for a safe journey for us and our children, with all our possessions. I was ashamed to ask the king of soldiers and horsemen to protect us from enemies on the road, because we had told the king, the gracious hand of our God is on everyone who looks to him, but his great anger is against all who forsake him. So we fasted and petitioned our God about this, and he answered our prayer. Verse 24, Then I set apart 12 of the leading priests, namely Sherebiah, Hashabiah, and 10 of their brothers, and I weighed out to them the offering of silver and gold, and the articles that the king, his advisers, his officials, and all Israel present there had donated for the house of our God. I weighed out to them 650 talents of silver articles weighing 100 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 bowls of gold valued at 1,000 derricks, and 2 fine articles of polished bronze as precious as gold. Verse 28, I said to them, You as well as these articles are consecrated to the Lord. The silver and gold are a freewill offering to the Lord, the God of your ancestors. Guard them carefully until you weigh them out in the chambers of the house of the Lord in Jerusalem before the leading priests and the Levites and the family heads of Israel. Verse 30, Then the priests and Levites received the silver and gold and sacred articles that had been weighed out to be taken to the house of our God in Jerusalem. On the 12th day of the first month, we set out from Ahava Canal to go to Jerusalem. The hand of our God was on us, and he protected us from enemies and bandits along the way. So we arrived in Jerusalem, where we rested 3 days. On the 4th day, in the house of our God, we weighed out the silver and gold and the sacred articles in the hands of Meremoth, son of Uriah, the priest. Eleazar, son of Phinehas, was with them, and so were the Levites, Jozabad, son of Jeshua, and Noadiah, son of Benui. Verse 34, everything was accounted for by number and weight, and the entire weight was recorded at that time. Then the exiles who had returned from captivity sacrificed burnt offerings to the God of Israel, 12 bulls from all Israel, 96 rams, 77 male lambs, and as a sin offering, 12 male goats. All this was a burnt offering to the Lord. They also delivered the king's orders to the royal satraps and to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, who then gave assistance to the people and to the house of God. That completes chapter 8. Chapter 9. Ezra's prayer about intermarriage, verse 1. After these things had been done, the leaders came to me and said, The people of Israel, including the priests and the Levites, had not kept themselves separate from the neighboring peoples with their detestable practices, like those of the Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Ammonites, Moabites, Egyptians, and Amorites. They have taken some of their daughters as wives for themselves, and their sons, and have mingled the holy race with the peoples around them. And the leaders and officials have led the way in this unfaithfulness. When I heard this, I tore my tunic and cloak, pulled hair from my head and beard, and sat down appalled. Then everyone who trembled at the words of the God of Israel gathered around me because of this unfaithfulness of the exiles. And I sat there appalled until the evening sacrifice. Verse 5. Then at the evening sacrifice I arose from my self-abasement with my tunic and cloak torn. I fell on my knees with my hands spread out to the Lord my God and prayed. I am too ashamed and disgraced, my God, to lift up my face to you, because our sins are higher than our heads, and our guilt has reached to the heavens. From the days of our ancestors until now, our guilt has been great. Because of our sins, we and our kings and our priests have been subjected to the sword and captivity, to pillage and humiliation at the hand of foreign kings, as it is today. But now, for a brief moment, the Lord our God has been gracious in leaving us a remnant and giving us a firm place in the sanctuary. And so our God gives light to our eyes and a little relief in our bondage. Though we are slaves, our God has not forsaken us in our bondage. He has shown us kindness in the sight of the kings of Persia. He has granted us new life to rebuild the house of our God and repair its ruins. And he has given us a wall of protection in Judah and Jerusalem. Verse 10. But now, our God, what can we say after this? For we have forsaken the command you have gave through your servants the prophets when you said, the land you are entering to possess is a land polluted by the corruption of its peoples. Man, my nose is just... By their detestable practices they have filled it with their impurity from one end to the other. Therefore do not give your daughters in marriage to their sons, or take their daughters for your sons. Do not seek a treaty of friendship with them at any time, that you may be strong and eat the good things of the land, and leave it to your children as an everlasting inheritance. What has happened to us is a result of our evil deeds and our great guilt, and yet, our God, you have punished us less than our sins deserved, and has given us a remnant like this. Shall we then break your commands again and intermarry with the peoples who commit such detestable practices? Would you not be angry enough with us to destroy us, leaving us to remnant or survivor? Verse 15. Lord, the God of Israel, you are righteous. We are left this day as a remnant. Here we are before you in our guilt, though because of it not one of us can stand in your presence. That completes chapter 9. We got one more chapter, finish the book of Ezra, so might as well do it. The people's confession of sin, chapter 10. Verse 1. While Ezra was praying and confessing, weeping and throwing himself down before the house of God, a large crowd of Israelites, men, women, and children, gathered around him. They too wept bitterly. Then Shechaniah, son of Jehiel, one of the descendants of Elam, said to Ezra, We have been unfaithful to our God by marrying foreign women from the people around us. But in spite of this, there is still hope for Israel. Now let us make a covenant before our God to send away all these women and their children in accordance with the counsel of my Lord and of those who fear the commands of our God. Let it be done according to the law. Rise up. This matter is in your hands. We will support you, so take courage and do it. Verse 5. So Ezra rose up and put the leading priests and Levites and all Israel under oath to do what had been suggested, and they took the oath. Then Ezra withdrew from before the house of God and went to the room of Jehohanan, son of Eliashib. While he was there, he ate no food and drank no water because he continued to mourn over the unfaithfulness of the exiles. Verse 7. A proclamation was then issued throughout Judah and Jerusalem for all the exiles to assemble in Jerusalem. Anyone who failed to appear within 3 days would forfeit all his property in accordance with the decision of the officials and elders, and would himself be expelled from the assembly of the exiles. Within the 3 days all the men of Judah and Benjamin had gathered in Jerusalem, and on the 20th day of the 9th month all the people were sitting in the square before the house of God, greatly distressed by the accusation and because of the rain. Verse 10. Then Ezra the priest stood up and said to them, You have been unfaithful. You have married foreign women, adding to Israel's guilt. Now honor the Lord, the God of your ancestors, and do his will. Separate yourselves from the peoples around you and from your foreign wives. The whole assembly responded with a loud voice, You are right. We must do as you say. But there are many people here, and it is the rainy season, so we cannot stand outside. Besides, this matter cannot be taken care of in a day or two, because we have sinned greatly in this thing. Let our officials act for the whole assembly. Then let everyone in our towns who has married a foreign woman come at a set time, along with the elders and judges of each town, until the fierce anger of our God in this matter is turned away from us. Only Jonathan, son of Asahel, and Jahaziah, son of Tikvah, supported by Meshullam and Shabbatai the Levite, opposed this. So the exiles did as was proposed. Ezra the priest selected men who were family heads, one from each family division, and all of them designated by name. On the first day of the 11th month they sat down to investigate the cases. Verse 17. And by the first day of the first month they finished dealing with all the men who had married foreign women, those guilty of intermarriage. Verse 18. Among the descendants of the priests, the following had married foreign women. From the descendants of Joshua, son of Josedek, and his brothers Maaseiah, Elisir, Jerub, and Gedaliah. They all gave their hands in pledge to put away their wives, and for their guilt they each presented a ram from the flock as a guilt offering. close parentheses. Verse 20, from the descendants of Immer, Hanai and Zebediah. From the descendants of Haram, Maaseiah, Elisha, Shemaiah, Jahil, and Uzziah. From the descendants of Pashur, Elionai, Maaseiah, Ishmael, Nathaniel, Jozabad, and Elasa. Among the Levites, Jozabad, Shemai, Kiliite, parentheses, that is Kilita, close parentheses, Petahiah, Judah, and Elasar. From the musicians, Eliashib, from the gatekeepers, Shalom, Tilim, and Eri. Verse 25, and among the other Israelites, from the descendants of Parosh, Ramiah, Isaiah, Malchijah, Majamin, Elisar, Malgijah, and Benaiah. From the descendants of Elam, Mattaniah, Zechariah, Jehiel, Abdil, Jeremoth, and Elijah. From the descendants of Zatu, Eliunai, Eliashib, Mattaniah, Jeremoth, Zabad, and Azizah. From the descendants of Bibai, Jehonan, Hananiah, Zabai, and Altalai. From the descendants of Benai, Meshulam, Maluk, Adiah, Jashub, Sheil, and Jeremoth. Verse 30. From the descendants of Pahat, Moab, Adnah, Kilal, Benaniah, Messiah, Mattaniah, Bazalel, Benui, and Manasseh. From the descendants of Haram, Eliezer, Ishijah, Malchijah, Shemiah, Shimeon, Benjamin, Maluk, and Shemariah. From the descendants of Hashum, Mattanai, Zabad, Eliphalet, Jeremiah, Manasseh, and Shimui. From the descendants of Benai, Madai, Amram, Uel. Verse 35, Benaniah, Bediah, Keluai, Vaniah, Meremoth, Eliashib, Mattaniah, and Jasu. From the descendants of Benaiah, Shemai, Shelemiah, Nathan, Adiah. Verse 40, Machanadebai, Shashai, Shariah, Azrael, Shelemiah, Shemariah, Shalom, Amariah, and Joseph. From the descendants of Nebo, Jael, Mashathiah, Zabad, Zebina, Jedi, Joel, and Benaniah. Verse 44, all these had married foreign women, and some of them had children by these wives. And that completes chapter 10, and that completes the book of Ezra. Wow, completed 2 books. Cool. Book of Nehemiah is next. Alright. It just turned midnight. Yeah, got it done. Alright, so hopefully my cousin's still up. See ya.